Imagine being at the top of your game, winning millions, holding world titles, and then one small decision could cost you your legacy. That's exactly what's happening with Terence Crawford right now. And even boxing legend Oscar De La Hoya is calling him out. What did Crawford do that's shaking the boxing world? Stick around, because this isn't just about money, it's about respect, power, and the fight behind the fight. Hey, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Fenin, and today we're diving into a hot topic in boxing: the tension between Terence Crawford, the WBC, and Oscar De La Hoya. The drama kicked off when Oscar De La Hoya called out Crawford, saying he's forgetting where he came from and leaving a lot of fighters behind in the process. So, what's really going on? Let's break it down this week. The boxing world was shaken by a major development. The WBC officially stripped Terence "Bud" Crawford of his 168-pound title. The reason? Crawford declined to pay the sanctioning fees required to hold onto the belt. While $300,000 might seem like a lot for most of us, for Crawford, a fighter who has earned tens of millions over his career, it's a relatively small fraction of what he's made in the sport. Still, his refusal has ignited a heated debate, and it's raised questions about respect, legacy, and the structures that govern professional boxing. Immediately, reactions poured in from across the boxing community, but one voice stood out above the rest: Hall of Famer Oscar De La Hoya. Oscar, who not only had a legendary career inside the ring but has also built a successful career as a promoter, didn't hold back in sharing his opinion. According to him, Crawford's decision to refuse payment isn't just a financial choice. It's a reflection of a disconnect from the very system that gave him the opportunities to rise to the top. In Oscar's view, Terence Crawford's action could be seen as turning his back on the sport's governing bodies, organizations that helped pave the way for his success and set him on the path to multi-million-dollar fights. To understand why this is such a big deal, it's important to know how sanctioning bodies like the WBC operate. These organizations are not just bureaucratic entities, they're gatekeepers of opportunity in boxing. When a fighter starts out, they compete for regional belts and are gradually ranked by these organizations. Rankings are what determine who gets the shot at bigger titles. Without being ranked in the WBC, IBF, WBA, or WBO systems, a fighter wouldn't have the chance to fight for world championships. Those early opportunities, often paid in smaller purses, are what eventually lead to the big paydays for which stars like Crawford are now famous. In other words, the WBC and other sanctioning bodies essentially helped build the ladder that Crawford climbed to reach the pinnacle of his career. Without them, there would have been no structured path to earning tens of millions, no chance to fight in high-profile matchups, and no way to become a household name. From this perspective, Oscar De La Hoya's critique makes sense. Refusing to pay the fee could be interpreted as forgetting the role that these organizations played in his success. Of course, there's another way to look at it. Some fans and analysts argue that Crawford's decision isn't about disrespect but a strategic negotiation tactic. Terence Crawford is known throughout boxing for being shrewd and calculated in his approach to contracts and negotiations. He's the kind of fighter who will press every advantage when he sees an opportunity, whether that's in the ring or at the bargaining table. From this angle, his refusal to pay the WBC fee isn't a moral statement, it's simply Crawford exercising leverage, using his position to control the terms in his favor. This is where things get tricky for the sport. On one hand, Crawford is within his rights to make this choice. He's a fighter with leverage, financial stability, and fame, and he can decide how to navigate the system. On the other hand, the signal this sends to other fighters could have long-term consequences. If rising fighters start thinking they can skip paying sanctioning fees once they hit a certain threshold, it could undermine the structure that helps organize fights and determine rankings. Boxing has always been a complicated sport, with overlapping promoters, managers, and sanctioning bodies. This system isn't perfect, but it is what allows organized matchups to happen. Any disruption to that system can ripple through the sport in unexpected ways. It's also worth noting that Crawford didn't refuse to pay all sanctioning fees across the board. He has historically paid fees to the IBF, WBA, and WBO, which shows that he's not completely against supporting the system. The sticking point with the WBC was the amount of money requested, not an outright rejection of the concept of sanctioning fees. This nuance is important because it suggests that Crawford's move isn't about making a principled stand or rejecting the sports institutions entirely. It's more about negotiation and control. Even so, the optics matter. To someone like Oscar De La Hoya, who has spent decades in boxing and understands both the fighter and promoter sides of the business, The refusal can look like a disregard for the foundations of the sport. Oscar's point is less about the money itself and more about the idea of acknowledgement and respect. When you reach the top, when you have earned your place and your fortune through a structured path, there's an expectation that you respect the institutions that helped you get there. That's why this story has sparked so much debate and why Crawford's decision has become more than just a financial matter. It's now a question of boxing ethics and legacy. At the end of the day, boxing will continue to evolve, and stars like Crawford will make decisions based on their interests. But it's hard to ignore the broader implications of what happened this week. The WBC stripping Terence Crawford of his 168-pound title is a reminder that boxing is about more than just the fighters in the ring. It's about rankings, titles, negotiations, and the structures that create opportunities. And as Crawford moves forward, whether fans agree with him or not, this moment will be remembered as a defining instance in his career, a moment that raises important questions about leverage, respect, and the business side of boxing. Before we dive into the details of what happened with Terence Crawford and the WBC, I want to take a moment to say a quick thank you. If you're new to the channel, make sure to hit that subscribe button. It really does help support everything we do here. And to everyone who's been a part of this community, whether it's by hyping videos, donating through super thanks, or simply sharing the content, thank you. Your support matters more than you might think. Even small gestures can make a big difference in helping the channel grow and getting these stories out to more people. Every view, every like, every share combined, they help the word spread. And I genuinely appreciate it. Without that community support, none of this would be possible. Now, let's get back to the main story. Terence Crawford and the WBC controversy. Recently, the WBC demanded that Crawford pay approximately $300,000 in sanctioning fees to keep his 168-pound title. For context, sanctioning fees are payments fighters make to the organizations that sanction their titles. These fees go toward the administration, ranking systems, and other organizational functions that allow champions to earn their place and defend their titles. While $300,000 is a significant sum, for Crawford, who has earned millions over his career, it is a relatively small percentage of his total earnings. Crawford, however, declined to pay the WBC. His reasoning: he claimed that he didn't fully understand what the organization does with the money. From his perspective, it wasn't clear how the fees benefited him directly or why he should be responsible for such a large payment. And honestly, a lot of fans agreed with him. Many supporters praised Crawford for standing his ground, arguing that fighters, even at the top level, shouldn't feel obligated to funnel enormous sums of money into organizations whose impact isn't always transparent. But this is where things get complicated. While many fans sided with Crawford, Oscar De La Hoya's reaction brought a very different perspective. Oscar, a Hall of Fame boxer and now one of boxing's top promoters, weighed in with strong opinions. He didn't see Crawford's choice as just a simple negotiation or personal decision. Instead, he viewed it as a disconnect from the system that helped Crawford achieve success in the first place. To understand Oscar's point of view, it's worth considering his experience in boxing. Oscar De La Hoya has seen the sport from multiple angles: as a fighter, a promoter, and someone deeply involved in its business operations. He knows firsthand the importance of sanctioning bodies and how they create opportunities for fighters to climb the ranks. From regional titles to world championships, these organizations are the gatekeepers of the sport. Without them, fighters wouldn't have the structured pathways that allow them to rise through the ranks, gain exposure, and ultimately secure high-paying fights. From Oscar's perspective, Crawford's refusal to pay the WBC wasn't just about money, it was about respect. The sanctioning bodies, for all their flaws, are part of the foundation that allows fighters to make millions. Declining to contribute to that system, especially at the point when Crawford has reached the pinnacle of the sport, can be interpreted as turning away from the very institutions that helped him succeed. That's a perspective that resonated with many in the boxing world, even if it clashed with the opinions of fans who supported Crawford's decision. Interestingly, it's not as if Crawford has a history of rejecting sanctioning fees across the board. He has consistently paid fees to other organizations like the IBF, WBA, and WBO. The dispute with the WBC, therefore, isn't about Crawford rejecting the concept of fees entirely, it's about the specific amount and perhaps the perceived value of what he was being asked to pay. That nuance is important because it shows that Crawford's move wasn't necessarily a moral stance or a rebellion against boxing's institutions. It was, at least partially, a strategic decision. Still, the optics are difficult to ignore. In a sport where respect for the system often matters as much as skill in the ring, Crawford's decision has sparked debate about legacy and ethics. Can a fighter achieve greatness while refusing to acknowledge the structures that helped them reach the top? Or is this simply the natural evolution of a fighter asserting their leverage in a business that has always been as much about negotiations as it is about punches? In the end, this story isn't just about Crawford or the WBC. It's about the complexities of boxing itself. It shows how money, respect, opportunity, and personal strategy intersect in ways that fans don't always see. Crawford made his decision. Fans reacted, and Oscar De La Hoya added his perspective. And while the debates will continue, one thing is certain: this moment will be remembered as a significant chapter in Crawford's career and in the larger conversation about boxing governance and fighter responsibility. Oscar, a Hall of Fame fighter and now a top-tier promoter, wasn't having it. He pointed out that Crawford is making huge money, millions upon millions, and yet box at a $300,000 fee. "Come on," Oscar said. "You've been paying these fees for years. Once the big payday comes, now you decide not to pay." The point Oscar is making is important. Early in a fighter's career, you climb the ranks through the sanctioning bodies, the WBC, WBA, IBF, and WBO. These organizations rank fighters and give them opportunities to fight for regional belts, then eventually world titles. Without them, Crawford would never have had the chance to earn a $50 million payday. Crawford did pay fees to the other sanctioning bodies, the IBF, WBA, and WBO. The issue here was the amount requested by the WBC, not a refusal to pay all fees. Still, Oscar argues that Crawford's decision shows a lack of appreciation for the system that helped him succeed. In short, this isn't just about money, it's about recognizing the path that got you to the top and respecting the institutions that made those opportunities possible. Crawford may have had his reasons, but Oscar sees it as forgetting one's roots. And in boxing, that perspective matters a lot. The real question here isn't whether Terence Crawford is making some bold standards about how much he was actually willing to pay. Honestly, I don't think this is about forgetting where he came from. This is just how Crawford operates. If you've been paying attention, his style is all about negotiation and leverage. Once he sees an advantage, he's going to press it. That's just his approach. He focuses on what works for him, not necessarily the fallout for anyone else involved. Now, this does send a signal to other fighters. If someone thinks they can skip paying sanctioning fees once they hit a certain level, that could ripple through the sport. Boxing already has a complex system. Promoters, managers, and sanctioning bodies all play a role. Some promoters want a closed system where they control everything, but the current structure forces them to work with sanctioning bodies to make fights happen. Crawford's move shakes up that balance a little, whether intentionally or not. At the end of the day, boxing is boxing. The sport will keep moving forward. And while there's this artificial money bubble, thanks in part to big payouts that grab attention, think it's bound to burst eventually. But in the meantime, there's still a lot to look forward to. This weekend, for example, we've got the PBC fight card with Asai Pitbull Cruz versus Lamont Roach. Plenty of exciting matchups that I'll be covering on the channel. That said, for Crawford fans, it's unfortunate. With him refusing to defend, there's no more undisputed champion at 168 pounds. When people look back at his career, yes, he was the undisputed champion for a moment, but he never really had a full defended reign at 147 or 168 pounds. It's a detail that matters when talking about his legacy. Anyway, that's my take. I want to hear what you think. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. That's it from me for now. Deuces.